John.
Hello, hello, and
You,
what?
you don't have to do the same thing as Dave.
No, even I was gonna say good morning, and I know that's usually what we do at the end.
Well,
So,
that's why I said you don't have to be the same as Dave. You do what you need to do.
uh, but anyway, hi. This is over coffee. Weekly, well, multi-weekly. How would you describe it? It's an alternating daily show where we talk about a whole lot of nothing. If you can kind of tell, we're both kind of a little tired this morning, and at the same time, we are missing a handful of people. So
We're
it's just
missing two
myself.
hosts. We're missing half of our hosts, John.
Yeah. But anyway,
But
yeah,
it's
no,
Friday.
it is Friday. It is Friday. It is Memorial Day weekend.
Oh yes, summer hours start today for me.
That's cool. I think my job does something like that similar as well. Oh, you're
I,
coming in a little bit low, by the way.
I'm coming in a little bit low. Really? Better? Worse? How about now?
Yeah, it's fine. I got the stream up just to make sure that the levels are good.
Huh.
But anyway, do you have any plans for this weekend?
I'm gonna go see my. I'm gonna go visit my friend John and my Blackstone Grill tomorrow. John has my grill in his garage, and then I'm gonna hang out with Rebecca on Sunday and Monday, and she's gonna take her skateboard lessons, and hopefully we'll get to I'll get to watch her do some learn to skate.
Cool. I've got my sister's coming up from Virginia with my nieces.
Nice.
I think she's going to be here today, tomorrow, and Sunday, and then she's leaving Monday. Um, so we might be doing something with the kids, maybe taking them to Adventureland or something.
Woo!
Other than that, I did some yard work yesterday, just trying to get the yard in order. I need like a dumpster. I have a whole lot of stuff I just have to just get rid of. Uh, Clutter is such a nasty thing because you don't realize how bad it is until you just get rid of it all, and then realize just how drastically different everything looks once there's like, nothing there.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I do hear you. Um, I just I'm getting through paperwork and old paperwork that I don't need anymore. There's zero reason for me to. So it's every time I get rid of a box, it's pretty cool.
Is it stuff that you have to shred though? Like, is it that you like? Is it sensitive? Because
So
I always had that feeling of like, this is. I don't want to just throw this out because I'm worried about like.
no, that's a good question. So as it turns out, um, one of what I have to do is I actually have to. That's the only reason why I can't just dump it. I have to go through it, right? And whatever is not sensitive, I tear up, and whatever is sensitive, I put to the side, and I have a shredder. So, but that'll be a second round of shredding, you know. Otherwise, you end up getting caught up on uh, refilling the bag every 10, 20, shreds. So,
Right.
but yeah, but it feels good. It does feel good to get rid of clutter.
But yeah, that's probably going to be like just some cleanup stuff over this weekend. I'm not planning on traveling to anywhere or anything like that. Maybe might do like something with some friends, maybe either like a barbecue or just like some, getting in some games this weekend. Um, Anything else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's new or exciting that I'm looking forward to, but nothing really jumps out. I know
No.
before the stream started, we were talking about a few things. I mentioned that yesterday was well, actually, a couple of streams. There was two of them. One for Dragon Quest, which is a long-running RPG series from Japan, and the other was for the 30th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog. And both were
Does this sound
pretty.
better?
No, I mean, well, on the Zoom thing you sounded fine, but on the stream you were just a little bit quiet.
How about now?
Hmm.
How about now? Any better?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Louder?
That's good. That's good. That's good.
Because I went and I saw that my microphone volume was all the way down to 30. I don't know why. I'm gonna
But
blame someone else.
anyway, the point is that yeah, there was a couple of
Point.
streams yesterday, which is interesting, and that so like I said, Dragon Quest had one stream and Sonic had another one. Both involved a lot of, well, both involved remakes and two new announcements. Although the new announcements are a bit further away, basically just saying, "Hey, we have something that's coming up, but this is just a teaser." Even though
Sonic the Hedgehog. So when's the last time you've played Sonic the Hedgehog?
well, actually, I play Sonic the Hedgehog not on a regular basis, but I've played it a few times because the last Sonic game I played was Sonic Mania,
Okay.
which is oh yeah, Zino was just saying that they blame Doug because he's always so loud.
Yeah, that's
But
true. But he also said
Sonic,
we were a small crew today, so I asked him if he means that we're short.
yeah. The funny thing about Sonic the Hedgehog is that it's a franchise that's endured despite itself, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense because I was never enamored with the game to begin with.
Like it was a solid series on the Sega Genesis. There was arguably, depending on how you want to phrase it, there was like 3 or 4 good games. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't crazy about every single one, but I mean, it did do a lot of things very different than what, let's say, Nintendo was doing.
Hmm.
But then the problem is that after, let's say, the Genesis, it always had a problem kind of keeping like an even footing. Like it had a 3D action game for the Dreamcast. There were two of them actually, although they don't really hold up as well. There's been a lot of games in the franchise that have just been kind of like either not great or actively bad, buggy or just uninspired.
And
And
a bad cartoon,
no, I mean, like, there's always been cartoons because it's been a very popular franchise. But the point is that
or just bad
compared to
cartoon.
something, well, just compared to like Nintendo, where they've consistently like innovated and built up and improved upon Mario with almost every single new release, so that like even if you might like some of the older ones better than some of the newer ones, you can clearly see that there is huge changes and growth and evolution in the franchise. You can't really do that with Sonic, or at least they haven't really done that with Sonic. Part of it is actually because of it's actually kind of interesting. Every time that they've made a Sonic game, they've essentially built a new engine for it and then
Uh,
thrown it out to do the next one,
oh,
which
that's
is kind
awesome.
of like right. It's like building a new mode of transportation every time you want to go somewhere and then destroying the old one. It's like cars are great, but now we need something new. We'll want to just make a better, different car. No, 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 no. That's awful. Let's just make something entirely new, and then you end up with like one of those. Sonic did have better media than Mario. Yeah, that's true because Sonic had more cartoons than Mario did. The movie was arguably better than the Super Mario one was, and even though
That's what our comparison is.
it also had comic books and stuff. Like the point is that Sega was much better with licensing out Sonic for other stuff and letting people do things with it. So it kind of allowed the brand to endure despite, let's say, a lot of like dry spells of either not good games or no games at all. Whereas Nintendo, because they're very protective with their franchises, they've been much more um, like they don't really let anybody else make other Mario games. Like you know what I mean? Like Nintendo's not going to say, "Hey, okay, we'll let somebody else develop a game for us." That would
Right,
never happen.
right.
Um, but the Mario cartoons did have Milli Vanilli, and Sonic only had Urkel. So take that with you
Oh
will,
my
Zano.
God. You know what? I also I'll be honest. Even with the games with Sonic when Sonic came out, I was bet I liked Alex Kidd in Miracle World better.
Wow. Okay, that is an interesting take.
Yeah, I like that game better. I played that game hours and days, weeks ago.
I think that part of the issue is that you would think that Sega would put Sonic much more up in front for considering how much it elevated the brand as a whole and allowed them to really kind of dominate things. But the problem with Sega, just kind of briefly dovetailing into something else, is that they made a lot of bad decisions in the late '90s, early 2000s that really kind of knocked them back quite a bit, and they've never really been able to recover. It's why they're not a console maker anymore. Is that they kind of squandered the lead that they had, following up on a lot of bad ideas, And instead of like Nintendo, where it's like we have these certain franchises, we're going to focus on those. We're
Hmm.
going to focus on the hardware. We have a single focused vision and going to just improve upon that. The problem was that Sega of Japan and Sega of America had clashing ideas over where the future of the company should go,
Mm, okay.
and Sega kind of zigged when Nintendo zagged. Now, granted, like that's not to say that Nintendo was perfect either. Like Nintendo had a lot of
No,
struggling.
it's not. But if you put them side by side, it's a clear delineation of I'm going to air quote here winner.
Well, the crazy thing is
So
that Nintendo's biggest, well, no, Sega's biggest folly is that they essentially knocked themselves out of the console business by a lot of bad decisions. Nintendo's biggest folly is that they essentially gave way to one of their biggest rivals. So I don't know which is arguably worse. The fact, considering that Sega is still around, although a lot of that is due to a lot of really generous people who believed in the company supporting it monetarily when it was doing poorly. Whereas Nintendo, as bad as it's always been, has been able to kind of ride out the storm just because of their successes. Like, even as bad as, let's say, well, not as bad as, let's say, poorly received. No, that's not a good way to put it this way. As little success as the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube had compared to, let's say, the Super Nintendo and the stuff that came before it, they managed to still do things good in other ways that allowed them to kind of ride out the storm when things weren't perfect. Like they always had a solid handheld division, which managed to kind of help propel them up. They always had solid titles, which always did well for them, that they also fully owned, that managed to sell even despite, let's say, how the systems themselves might not have been doing at the time. And then when they came up with really good ideas, they just blasted out of the park. The
hmm
downside is that I've complained about it on the show before. Nintendo has a habit of getting really complacent and also full of themselves. Like when things do really well, they kind of forget about all the bad that happened before. So they never think of like how can we continue to improve or how can we continue to do better. It's like they like for example with the Nintendo Switch. I think that's like the apex of what Nintendo can do with their consoles. They can make the idea further and further, well defined of like we're gonna make something that's a split handheld and a console. I don't think they would ever do a dedicated handheld again, unless it's like a one-off thing of like, oh, we're gonna do like a Game Boy Classic where it's like the old Game Boy, but has a bunch of games preloaded because that was really popular,
right.
or that they're going to do like something like the Game and Watch, where this is like a fun celebratory thing. I think it's going to be we're all focusing just on one single hardware lineup. It just has the benefit of being able to do dual handheld, and we're just going to focus on making that technology better and better. I don't think they're going to go back to motion controls. I think they're just going to have it implemented slightly, but not the primary focus. Um, just real quick, yeah, to what Zino was saying, Nintendo has always followed through, even with bad ideas. So yeah, they've always kind of stuck through, no matter how bad it is, and they have loads of hubris. From what I've heard from people online, they say that Nintendo always approaches this stuff the same way that a toy manufacturer would, of like come out with something really big, hype it up, have make the availability intentionally limited, and also like focus on the product itself being what sells it as opposed to the company as a whole or the branding or whatever. And in some ways that's kind of bad because, well, like we were talking about this the other day. So I was playing some GameCube games, but I was playing them on my PC through an emulator through Dolphin, because it's one of the only ways to really play the stuff in a good solid way. Although it's not ideal because it's just replicating the system and it's buggy. They kind of crash sometimes, so but the alternative is nothing. The alternative
Right.
is I
Yeah,
buy a
yeah,
GameCube and I go through all that hassle because Nintendo just doesn't make it available, and even still, because they drag their feet, so many other companies now just release their own stuff themselves and just sell it. Whereas they could be partnering with Nintendo or doing something where it's like, all right, look, we have these games. We're not going to go through the effort of releasing these on our own. So why don't we just do like a Netflix style thing and just work out a licensing deal? But part of it is also communication. Like Nintendo, like most of these game companies will never actively say what's going on behind the scenes.
You're right.
So like
I was just
Nintendo.
I just pulled up. I was just pulling up Sega and looking up some things here. Um, did you know that Sega uh took a role in forming uh the video ratings council?
Oh yeah, no, that's because of Night Trap and all that stuff. Because
Yeah,
Nintendo,
I was just reading about that.
Sega was releasing stuff uncensored, whereas Nintendo was, and because of the combination of Mortal Kombat and Night Trap, which was a game on the Sega CD,
Yep.
it was basically dogpiled by by people in the '90s of like, oh, video games are bad and violent, and this is pre-Columbine. This was like before the rise in school violence and things like that. So it's crazy. They just politicians just basically needed an easy win,
Hey,
and Nintendo jumped on and said, "Hey, we don't do any of that bad stuff. We're perfectly fine with doing this." But it was a way of like trying to take the wind out of Sega's sails,
right, but it
because
didn't
at
work.
least in America, for a brief period, Sega was actually outselling Nintendo. I mean, they were still
Yes.
both wildly successful, but Sega was actually the market leader in Europe and America right up until about the 32X and the Sega CD and the Sega Saturn, and that's when kind of things took a nosedive. So,
But so just to throw it out there. Uh what was I going to say? So just so you know, its revenue is still 247 billion ren.
no, I
Yen.
know
Yen.
it's like
So
Nintendo is still
it's
insanely.
still
They had
yeah,
no incentive to do anything differently, and that's kind of part of the
yeah.
problem. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
like
yeah.
when they do
I'm
really
with you.
well, they do so well that it's like, well, we
Wow.
don't have to make any changes or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, how like you've have you ever played the Switch online? Like, have you ever actually played it on the internet with other people, or at least attempted to?
No. No, I have not. I've only ever played couch co-op games.
So like couch co-op is fine, but if you actually try to take that thing on the internet, its netcode is awful. Like it's and it's one of those things where a lot of other companies figured out this stuff years ago,
Right.
but Nintendo does like Nintendo. You can't do voice chats with friends. You can't, you can have like a friends list, but yeah, for a while they had it where you had to do friends codes, and they wanted to do it to kind of be safe with, with kids and
With
whatever.
kids,
But
right.
but it was all a lot of really just dumb unnecessary stuff. And like Nintendo is very much like the early 2000s, where everybody else is kind of up to snuff when it comes to having good web stuff. It was discovered like in the last year or two that Nintendo was using a web code that still had to like check to see if whatever was using it was operating off of Windows XP or something insane like that. Like it was such an outdated web code that part of the thing that it had to do was it had to make sure what was and wasn't running, and it was looking for like stuff that was like, again, how many system releases old are we, that but yeah, it's like a
Well,
couple of people who I watch have
that
talked about people who, hold on, people who've
yeah.
been in meetings who said, hey, we'll build you stuff, like we'll do things of like, to be better, because you really need to compete with like Xbox Live and things like that. And it's been told that people in Nintendo offices at this meeting were said, don't say Xbox Live, don't say whatever, like nobody here knows what that means. And whether that means that we're literally just not focusing on anything else that anybody's doing but us, or that we choose to just not focus on anything internet related, we just want to focus on the games and the systems or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, yeah. I don't like that with companies. And this is, you know what? That's I'm just gonna segue really quick, but I'll come back. I promise. Is that's one of the things that I don't like about larger corporations is and why they always make the same mistakes over and over and over because they put their hands over their ears and goes la 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 la. I don't want to hear anything about this company or how they did it. I don't want to hear anything about this company and how they did it instead of saying, "Oh, how did they do it so that maybe we won't make the same mistakes?" Nobody wants to learn from the mistakes. Everybody says, "You know what? We can do it better." And then they go off and they do it lousy.
and
And
sometimes it works and other times it doesn't. It's like, why can't you just look at what works for other people and say, let's do that? Like maybe
yes.
not copy it whole pace, but like, hey, people really like online services
Yeah.
and really like Netflix. Like Nintendo could have been doing what Netflix has been doing for years. And even with what they offer, it's limited to It's limited to Nintendo and Super Nintendo games.
Right.
It doesn't even have all of their first party releases, which, granted, for whatever reason, whether it's because of relicensing of the ESRB or something like that, who knows? It's also because they don't flat out say why we don't do this or why we're working on this. But they don't have any Game Boy games. They don't
Right.
have any Game Boy Advance. They don't have any GameCube. They don't have any N64. They don't have any Wii. Like, there's tons of stuff that people would probably pay more. Like, I would gladly pay 4 times the amount that I'm paying for the yearly Nintendo subscription if I got more stuff out of it. Like, because I'm paying $20 a year, which, granted, arguably is nothing, but I would pay 80 a year if they just gave me more stuff to use it for. Even if I
Okay.
don't use it, I just want to have the option of being able to play that stuff.
All right. I
Or
get
it's
it.
like, hey, if I want to play a game, I don't have to mess around with my PC and emulate stuff or dig out a 20-year-old console, make sure I've got all the controllers and the memory cards and all this
And
stuff.
does it connect to today's TVs? Yeah, I
Right.
hear
Like, it doesn't connect, or doesn't connect well,
you. Right. Right. So I just wanted to point out, because I know we are talking about the rivalry between
Nintendo and
Nintendo and
Sega.
Sega and stuff like that, but as of recently, in the last 5 6 years, Sega and Nintendo actually have a really good working relationship with each other.
No, they
Uh,
do. They
no,
do.
no, no,
Like,
no. I just wanted to point it out. I believe you. I know you know all this stuff, but
oh,
I don't know.
Zano is saying that the Switch isn't powerful enough to emulate their own games. That's not necessarily true because people manage to hack this stuff to run things all the time. A lot of it is the argument comes down to one of two things. It's that Nintendo doesn't want to just hire somebody to emulate it for them and make it work in that way, or Nintendo wants to build something themselves from the ground up, but it's always argumentative of like, well, you guys are taking a problem that should be really easy and making it overly complicated.
I will say this, and I'm just going to talk from a technical side for a second here, having been or being a programmer or developer. I will say that porting from one system to it is very possible that there's some proprietary setups in each one of the systems, and the code base doesn't port from system to system and may need to be recompiled. The
But
unfortunate
there's
thing,
but there's plenty of emulators out there that have worked for years that do all this stuff already. Like, maybe not necessarily
right,
for GameCube. Like,
right,
I'll maybe argue that, say, like, okay, like, fine, like, maybe it's a bit more complicated to get it on an actual running system, but like Game Boy, N64.
So I think the thing is that I think in a lot of those cases the emulators that they're using are really recompiled, or really the game recompiled with a wrapper around it instead
Mhm.
of running the game on top of another piece of software. So they may be, but I don't think that Nintendo is specifically using emulators to run their own games on their other systems. I think what they do is they recompile it, which is why sometimes it takes so long to get a game out, because they have to get the code and port it. And I'll give you an example. I develop in Unity for Android and iOS. And when we have to, first of all, we have to make sure we use generic and not specific Android calls and C# and things like that. When we compile for Android, we have to do a different process to compile for iOS the same stuff. It's adds a couple of steps and stuff like that, but we have to be very careful to not taint our code, and we have to do the same thing if we want to compile for like TV or and there's a couple of PC and a couple of different platforms. But I just wanted to throw that. I don't know if that's what's behind it, John. I'm just saying that is
And
one additional possibility.
counter argument, counter argument. They've
I wasn't
emulated this
arguing.
stuff before on other consoles already. Like the 3DS, the Nintendo 3DS can run Game Boy games, and Game Boy Color games. The Wii U, the last console they had, the one that wasn't good, was running N64 games and Game Boy Advance games and
It's because
even
they
Wii games.
because their code base was, I mean, their code base or their structure or their actual hardware may be the same. That's the difference. It goes down to bit code all the way down to the machine language, and if the language is different or similar or the same, then it can run.
But they can't use what they've done before as the framework to say, all right, how do we make this work for this thing?
They can, but unfortunately, when people the depending on time. structures, I will tell you that development teams are always under pressure to just they wind up hard coding stuff, and it's not the right way to do it. Nobody's not a single developer out there will say this is the right way to do it, but this is what they have to do. And then every time they port it to a new system, they've got to start over from. They have to rebuild a new and uh, rather than rewrite the game, because don't forget the game may have some very proprietary coding in it, and you have to make sure that you put a wrapper around that. All I'm saying is it's not easy. I don't know if that's all the way, but I don't believe Nintendo is going out there and saying I'm going to run my game on a third party software, um, you know, so that other people can play it. They're going to say no, I'm going to rewrap it for this platform.
Well, the interesting thing is that like even in terms of
It'd be
like
interesting
Game
to know
Boy,
what they're doing. Sorry, go ahead.
other well that's the problem. Like nobody ever says anything. Like other companies are kind of doing something already. Like Konami, the people who did Castlevania and stuff like that, they put out this thing called the Castlevania Collection,
Right.
which was something that actually released on the Switch, and it has Game Boy games on it. So like it's running games on a system that Nintendo doesn't. Now, granted, like yeah, maybe it's somehow that the game itself. I don't know how the game is emulating. Let me rephrase that. I don't know how the collection is emulating the games, but it's clearly running something that like that Nintendo probably could. It's just the question is why aren't they, or why isn't it happening?
Right. Right.
It's like if a company that arguably isn't even making that many games nowadays could police a game that built in is running something that you're not offering, why is it that a company with which what you just said before is making like 300 billion in revenue can't just take a team that says figure this out? We don't care what the cost is. Well, not that we don't care what the cost is. Like, here's a budget, just figure this out so that we can have it, so that it's just something that we could then pitch for the online service.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. We're starting to investigate what it's going to take to compile the game Super Show for Nintendo Switch as well. You're right there, John.
I got an itch in my throat.
Oh, okay. It's like look like a goose. Um, but we can compile our game for Nintendo Switch. Uh,
Well, because it uses Unity, I think.
yes, games have been done on Unity. It's a Unity compiler, but it's a different It's once again a different process. But here, let me. And the only reason why I could add that additional information is because let me give you an example. If I want my game on Steam, I have to wrap my game, the entire code. I have to wrap my code in a Steam layer, in a Steam wrapper, which allows Steam to run the game the way it needs it within its system and make all the connections to its system. So there's a whole big thing that developers need to do if we want to release our game on Steam. And Epic has the same thing. It's not like I could just take my code base and upload my game into Steam like I do with the market with the Android the Play Store. So it's not the same, and we're finding that these platforms have a lot of proprietary things that need to be done so that way your game fits into their model. And I suspect that Nintendo has the same thing. So, but we'll find out. I'll let you know more as I find out as we explore it.
Yeah, it's like it's just interesting that like a company like Nintendo that's been around for a while, like I know we started with talking about Sega, and Sega they've kind of done the alternate, and that the fact that they're not making hardware anymore, they just make these compilations and they'll put together like all these games that they've had that they made for like the Sega. I mean, granted, like it's not like they're also releasing like all right, like the problem is that there's a lot of games that came out for consoles that are not easy to replicate, and nobody's really jumping at the bit to try to like offer those games. So there's a lot of stuff that was on Sega hardware that you're probably not going to see again, like Dreamcast games and Sega Saturn games and Sega 32X games, because it's like nobody's going to care about like Nights into Dreams. Like, no, it's maybe a bad example because Sega re-released that once, but maybe a better example is like nobody's going to care about like Sewer Shark,
No, that's
which
a
was a
shame.
or or like Magical Knight Ray Earth or something like that. Like
Or
all
Toe
these
Jam and
games.
Arrow. Oh wait, no, that's out.
No, no, I told you that,
I know.
and the new one's actually not that bad. Um, but yeah, no, as I was like, he's happy that they still have their Dreamcast. Yeah, no, there's a lot of Dreamcast games that are just going to vanish one day because, like, they're only in a physical format, and other than emulating online, nobody is going to take the effort and time to release new old Dreamcast games. Of like, hey, you remember all these great Dreamcast games that were not Sega exclusive? Well, here they are again. It's like nobody's going to do that. So unless it's the company that made them that wants to release them on their own,
Right.
like Capcom re-releasing one of the Street Fighter
Right,
collections,
which is
or
what we
Sega being like, "Hey, here's our first party games,"
right, which
But
is what we
anything
said.
outside of those, right?
Yeah. So John, we are at 7. Why don't you bring us home
All right.
and I can get this workday started.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. Zainar for hopping in the chat as well. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. We'll be back on Monday at 6:30.
No, we won't.
No, we will not. Oh, because
Wednesday.
it's a holiday. Right, right, right. Oh, so we will be back Wednesday at
Yep.
6:30 for
And
another episode.
listen very soon we will be jumping over to YouTube, and our content will start to come out of YouTube, where we have more focused sessions on particular topics, and we look to
Yep.
release them often.
All right.
So,
Again, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and have a great day and a good morning.
good morning. Thank you, John. Good.